Arizona Territory, 1879. The sun was a fire that would not die, and she was crawling through it. Her palms were bloodied, knees raw, lips cracked so deep they stung with each breath. The desert stretched out around her like a cruel joke, endless, dry, blistering. But up ahead, just past a ridge of scorched earth and scattered rock, a low wooden structure shimmered in the heat. A well. Real or not, it was the only thing keeping her moving. Sierra Langford dragged herself forward, her swollen belly heavy beneath her torn calico dress. She had been walking for 2 days since the wagon wreck, since the man she once thought she loved left her there with nothing but a bruised rib and the child inside her. She had not seen another soul. Her canteen had run dry yesterday. She could barely see now, her vision narrowing to a tunnel aimed at the well. She reached its base and collapsed beside it, too weak to lift the handle. Her breath came in shallow gasps. "Please," her voice was no louder than a whisper. "Please, someone." A shadow moved across the baked earth. He sat high on a painted horse, long braids draped over his shoulders, lean shoulders wrapped in a deer hide shirt. His face was carved from stone and sun-sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, dark eyes that missed nothing. He dismounted without a word, moving with quiet strength. Sierra blinked through her tears. "Water," she rasped. The man nodded once. He pulled the rope from the well, lowered the bucket, and brought up the cool, sweet water. He knelt beside her and held the dipper to her lips. She drank greedily. Her hands shook as she grabbed for more, but he steadied her wrists gently, giving her another sip and then another. Her body trembled as life returned in rushes. "I am Zahari," he said, his voice low and steady. "You are safe now." She tried to speak, but emotion clogged her throat. She looked up at him, and for the first time since she was left behind, her eyes softened. "Sierra," she said, "Langford, I thank you." Zahari studied her for a moment, then glanced to her stomach. "You carry a child," she nodded. 7 months, he looked out at the horizon, then back to her. "You cannot stay here, the sun will kill you." "I know," she whispered, "but I have nowhere else." Zahari stood, then offered his hand. "You do now." He helped her stand carefully, as though afraid she might break. She leaned into him, her legs wobbling. He did not move away. "I have a horse," he said. "We will ride." She hesitated. "Why would you help me?" He looked down at her, eyes unreadable. "Because you are alone, and you should not be." He lifted her into his saddle with care, then climbed up behind her, shielding her from the sun with his body. As the horse moved forward, Sierra leaned back against him. Her eyes fluttered shut, bone-deep exhaustion settling in again. For the first time in days, she let herself rest. They rode for hours, until the desert rolled into rocky hills and then into a wide canyon where a river ran shallow and clear. Zahari led the horse across a narrow path until they reached a small camp nestled in the shade of cottonwood trees. A single hide tent stood near the water. Chickens clucked nearby, and a clay stove still held the warmth of a morning fire. "This is my home," he said as he helped her down. "You will stay here, rest, heal." She looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. "Why are you being kind to me?" Zahari met her gaze. "Because someone should have been before now." He moved with quiet efficiency, laying out a soft bed of furs and blankets inside the tent. He brought her warm broth and herbs steeped in hot water. He stayed nearby but gave her space. She watched him through the tent opening as he tended the fire, fed the animals, checked the traps along the riverbank. Days passed. She regained her strength slowly. He spoke little but always looked her in the eye. He listened. He noticed when she winced and adjusted her seat. He made her tea when the baby kicked too hard. He was gentle in a way she had never known a man could be. One evening, she sat beside the fire, her hands resting lightly on her belly. "You live here alone," he nodded. "My family is gone, taken by sickness long ago." "I am sorry," he shrugged. "I have the land, the river, that is enough." She looked at him. "And now you have me." Zahari looked at her, then really looked. "Yes, now I have you." The fire crackled between them. The wind moved through the cottonwoods. Sierra's eyes lingered on his hands, calloused but careful. She remembered the way he lifted her, the way he watched her without judgment or pity. "Zahari," she said softly, "you saved me." He reached across the fire and touched her hand. "No, I only offered water. You saved yourself." She shook her head. "No, you gave me more than water." You gave me a place, a chance. He didn't pull his hand away. That night the baby kicked hard, waking her in the darkness. She cried out, clutching her stomach. He was there in seconds, crouching beside her. What is it? Just strong tonight, she breathed. It hurts. He pressed a hand gently to her belly, his palm warm and steady. He is strong, Sierra said with a smile. I think it is a girl. He smiled, then his first real one. Then she is strong like her mother. Sierra's breath caught at that, her eyes locked with his. Neither of them looked away. When morning came, he made her cornbread and brought her wild berries. She watched him from the shade, sun catching the edge of his jaw, and something inside her ached, but it was not pain. It was hope. The days turned warmer. The baby pressed lower. Sierra could feel the time drawing near. She was no longer afraid. Zahari stayed close. He carved a cradle from cottonwood. He lined it with rabbit fur and painted a small sun on the side. She found him sitting beside the river one evening, knife in hand, hands still. I have never raised a child, he said without looking up. She stepped closer. Neither have I, he turned then, and his voice was rougher than before. But I want to learn, if you will let me. Sierra's heart swelled. Her fingers brushed his shoulder. He turned to her, his eyes searching hers. You already have, she said. You already are. He stood slowly, towering over her. Then stay, not just until the child comes. Stay with me. She reached up and touched his face. I already have. Zahari leaned down, and their lips met soft, sure, a promise wrapped in warmth and truth. The desert wind moved around them, but all Sierra felt was him. She had crawled through hell to reach water. And in him, she had found more than water. She had found home. The cradle sat near the tent's opening, angled so the morning light touched only its far edge. Sierra ran her fingers along its painted rim, the small sun Zahari had carved catching gold in the dawn. Her back ached, hips swollen and slow with the weight she carried, but she stood anyway, barefoot on the cool river's smoothed stone, watching Zahari at the water's edge. He was crouched low, mending a net with deliberate motions. Trout flicked shadows beneath the surface, their movements sharp and sudden. She could tell by the set of his shoulders that he'd been awake long before her. I didn't hear you leave, she said, voice quiet. Her hand rested on the curve of her belly, as if steadying the child within. You were tired, he replied without looking up. The baby moved much last night. She stepped closer, wincing as a loose stone pressed into her heel. Did I wake you? No. He tied another knot, then glanced up. She will come soon. You shift when you sleep now. Your breath catches. I listen. Sierra crouched slowly beside him, the effort making her grit her teeth. You always listen. He dipped the net in the water, letting it drift. My grandfather said a man who doesn't listen can't keep anything worth holding. She traced a line in the sand with one finger, eyes on the moving current. My father only said children were loud and women louder. He didn't answer, but his hand found hers, palm rough against her fingers. They sat in silence, the kind that didn't press. After a while, she breathed in slowly. Back in Kansas, I never thought I'd see a river like this, or sleep without a roof, or feel safe with someone who didn't speak my language. You do speak it. Not yours. He looked at her then, brows drawn. You don't need to. I see what you mean. They sat until the net swelled with silver flashes. Zahari rose, pulled it in. She watched the flex of his arms, the way the fish danced wild before settling. He didn't waste movement, didn't boast when the haul was good. Just tied the net shut and walked toward the fire circle. As he cleaned the fish, she gathered cactus buds and mustard greens from the edge of the brush. Her feet dragged more now, but she knew the land better with each day. Knew where the bees gathered, where the rabbit paths ran, when the wind meant rain or dust. Later, as the fish sizzled and crisped, Sierra sat with her legs stretched long before her. Zahari handed her the first piece, steaming and flaking against the bark plate. Do you miss them? She asked after a few bites. Your people. He put down the knife and wiped his hands. I carry them. That is how I remember. Do you ever wish things had turned out different? His eyes settled on her, steady and unflinching. If they had, I would not have found you. She looked down, heart thudding once hard. I never thought I'd be glad for what happened, but I am. Zahari reached across and touched her wrist. She didn't flinch. Some things break so others can grow. That night the wind shifted. The air turned cooler and the clouds hung low and heavy. Zahari tied down the tent flaps, checked the fire pit twice. Sierra lay inside, curled on her side, one hand supporting the swell of her stomach. "Storm?" she asked when he came in. "Maybe, not strong." "But the air changes." She watched him as he sat beside her, his knees bent, arms resting loosely on his thighs. The fire outside cast flickering gold across the hide walls. She reached for his hand. "I'm scared," she whispered. He didn't pull away. "Of what?" "Of pain. Of what comes after. Of not being enough." Zahari turned to her fully. "You carried her through fire and silence. You are already more than enough." She closed her eyes, tears hot against her temples. "Promise me you'll stay." "I already built the cradle," he said. "I do not leave what I build." She laughed through her tears, breath hitching. "That's not a promise." He leaned forward, pressed his forehead gently to hers. "Then listen close. I stay with you. I raise her with you. I sleep beside you, gather for you, grow old with you." "That is my promise," Sierra whispered. "I believe you." I meant it to be believed. When he lay beside her, his hand resting over hers on her belly, the storm came. Rain pattered soft against the tent, steady, rhythmic. She listened to it until sleep claimed her. By morning, the earth smelled clean. The cradle held a folded length of rabbit hide Zahari had tanned at some point before she arrived, his quiet preparation, even then. She ran her fingers over it, heart full. Inside her, the child stirred, almost ready, and so was she. The pain came just after sundown. It wasn't sudden, a slow tightening at first, like something drawing inward deep inside her, quiet and certain. Sierra stood at the fire pit, turning a pot of simmering beans with a carved spoon when her breath caught and her knees bent slightly. Zahari looked up from where he was stripping bark from a long branch, his expression still but alert. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. He stood and crossed toward her. "It's time," she nodded once, jaw clenched. "Yes." Zahari moved with calm purpose, setting aside his work, placing fresh furs inside the tent, fetching the cloths she'd washed and folded days before. He stoked the fire higher and added water to the kettle. Her breath grew shallow as she walked with care to the tent, holding one hand to her lower back. Inside, she sank onto the bedding, sweat already forming at her temples. Zahari followed, kneeling beside her with a damp cloth. He didn't ask what to do. He only watched her face, waited for her to speak. "I need you to stay close," she said, voice strained but steady. He folded the cloth and brushed it against her neck. "I will not leave." The hours stretched long, the kind that don't pass like time but like weather, like wind and thunder. The pain came in waves, each stronger than the last. She gritted her teeth and gripped his hand until the blood drained from her knuckles. He didn't flinch, didn't speak unless she did. When she cried out, he whispered something in his own tongue, a sound low and even, like river stone under current. She didn't understand the words, but they steadied her. Outside, the moon rose full and pale. The fire cracked gently beyond the tent flaps. Every so often, Zahari stepped out to heat more water, his footsteps always returning before she called for him. By the time the child crowned, Sierra was soaked in sweat, her hair plastered to her cheeks, her eyes wild with exhaustion. She let out a sound that split the air and then silence. Then the cry, new and piercing, sharp as lightning through cotton. Zahari caught the child with practiced hands, wrapping her in the rabbit hide they'd set aside. Sierra lay back, trembling, tears streaming from the corners of her eyes. Her chest rose and fell with the slow rhythm of release. Zahari handed her the child, small, red-faced, fists clenched with life. Sierra took her, arms trembling, eyes wide with something deeper than joy. "She's here," she whispered. Zahari knelt beside her, his face changed softer somehow, no less strong but open. "She is." Sierra looked down at the girl, then at him. "You should give her a name." He blinked, surprised. "You wish that?" "I want her to carry something of you, of this place." Zahari looked at the child, then rested two fingers gently on her brow. "Nahimi, it means one who rises in the wind." Sierra smiled, her lips cracked and dry but her eyes bright. "Then she'll rise." He sat beside her, legs folded under him, eyes fixed on the child. "My mother gave me my name when the snow melted. She said it meant the one who watches for change." Sierra looked at him. "Have you been watching for me?" He didn't look away. "Yes." They stayed like that as the fire outside burned low and the tent filled with the small sounds of new life. Zahari brought her water, then broth, then sat with her again. He didn't speak often, but his hands never stopped moving, checking her comfort, adjusting the bedding, brushing sweat from her hair. Sierra fed the baby with careful hands, her body aching but her heart steady. When the child slept, she looked toward Zahari. "Where will we build her a place to play?" she asked. He met her gaze. "By the river, where the cottonwoods grow thick." "And when she walks, where will we teach her to go?" he answered without hesitation. "Anywhere her feet will carry her. As long as she knows how to return." Sierra leaned her head back and closed her eyes. "Then we'll teach her well." Zahari reached out and touched her shoulder, fingers brushing the damp fabric of her dress. "You are strong." She looked at him, her voice low. "Only because I had someone to lean on." He held her gaze, then looked to the child. "Then she will be strong too." When the fire burned down to coals and the night deepened, Zahari lay beside them, his body curved in quiet protection. The air held the scent of wood smoke and river stone. The child slept between them, her breath shallow and even. Sierra reached across the blankets and took his hand. "We belong here," she said. Zahari turned his face toward hers. "Yes. We do." They fell asleep like that, fingers entwined, their daughter curled between them, a family not born from ease, but from the slow, hard work of trust, of shelter, of love earned in silence and carried forward in every steady step. Morning waited outside, soft and gold. At first light, Sierra rose slowly, careful not to wake Naomi. The baby lay swaddled in soft hide, one tiny fist resting against her cheek, breath warm and even. Zahari still slept beside her, one arm curved protectively around them both. The lines of his face had eased in sleep, though his hand remained close to where she'd last gripped it during labor. Sierra stepped outside barefoot, the earth damp beneath her toes from the night before. Mist clung low along the riverbank, curling through the cottonwoods in thin ribbons. A quail called from the brush, and the sound settled in her chest like something rightfully placed. A mule deer stood at the edge of the trees, watching her with dark, glassy eyes, then vanished without sound. She gathered water from the river in the clay pitcher Zahari had taught her how to carry balanced against her hip. Her steps were slow, but her body felt different now, emptied, yes, but not hollow. Grounded. Inside the tent, Naomi stirred. Sierra returned and lifted her gently, settling onto the bedding with the child tucked against her breast. Zahari woke to the sound of their daughter suckling, his eyes clearing from sleep as he sat up. "You went out alone," he said, his voice still rough with sleep. "I didn't go far," he nodded, rubbing his jaw. "Still, from now on, wake me." "I'll try," she said, "but I like the quiet." He stretched his legs, then stood and stepped outside without another word. She knew he wasn't angry, his worry only came out in silence. Later that morning, he returned with a bundle of driggrass and a bundle of willow shoots tied together with sinew. "I'll build her a basket," he said. Sierra tilted her head. "To carry her in?" "No, for her first offerings." She looked down at Naomi, who blinked against the light. "What will we give?" "Corn when it grows, wild plum if the tree bears." Sierra traced Naomi's cheek with her thumb. "I've never had a harvest of my own." "You will." She stood and walked to the edge of the clearing while he began to strip the willow bark. "There's a patch near the southern slope," she said. "I saw wild tobacco growing there." Zahari looked up from his work. "We'll gather it soon. When the leaves are ready, that place will be hers." Sierra turned to face him. "Will you teach her your ways?" "I will. I want to learn too." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then I will teach you both." That evening, as the sun dropped low and long shadows stretched across the canyon floor, Zahari brought out a small hide bundle from beneath a stone near the fire pit. He unwrapped it slowly and revealed a worn set of bone tools, each one shaped with care. "These were my mother's," he said. "She taught me to carve, to weave, to listen." Sierra sat beside him, Naomi asleep across her lap. "You've never spoken of her before." "She died before you came, long before." "But she knew I would not live alone forever." Sierra watched the fire catch in the curve of his cheekbone. "Did she tell you that?" She said the earth was wide, but the heart is narrow. It makes room for only one at a time. Sierra rested her head against his shoulder. Then I'm grateful she left you space. Zahari reached for her hand, his thumb brushing the arch of her knuckle. You filled it. In the days that followed, the rhythm of their life began to settle. Mornings were spent tending to the growing patch of beans near the river's edge. Sierra learned to bind the stalks with yucca cord Zahari braided fresh each week. He showed her how to read the clouds for signs of dry wind or heavy air, how to press her palm to the soil and feel its thirst before the plants showed it. Nahimi watched it all from her cradle, eyes wide, mouth open in wordless wonder. One afternoon, Sierra paused mid-task and sat in the shade, fanning herself with a folded piece of bark. Zahari crouched nearby, scraping resin from a pine branch. "Do you want more children?" she asked, not looking at him. He stopped scraping. "Yes, if you do," she looked at him then. "Not yet, but one day," he nodded, "when the time is right." She reached for the bowl beside her and passed it to him. "You'll be a good father to all of them," he took it from her hands, "only because I have you." That night, Sierra lay with Nahimi curled at her side, her fingers threaded through Zahari's. The stars pulsed above them, sharp and close. She whispered into the dark, "I thought I'd lost everything." Zahari pressed a kiss to the back of her hand. "You found more." And she had not just safety, not just shelter, she had found someone who saw her as whole even when she was broken. And in the quiet hours of that desert life, as Nahimi breathed in sleep and the fire dwindled low, Sierra understood something she never had before. Love did not have to arrive loud or sudden. Sometimes it came like water, cool, offered freely, and enough to save you. The heat deepened by late summer, but the river still ran cool beneath the cottonwoods. Sierra stood knee-deep in it, her skirt hitched in one hand, a woven basket in the other. She moved slowly, careful not to slip on the smooth stones, her eyes scanning the current for watercress and willow shoots. Behind her, Nahimi sat in the shade, cooing at the shadows on the tent flap, watched over by Zahari's aunt, who'd arrived from the northern hills a week past. Sierra dipped her fingers into the current and pinched off a clump of green, laying it gently in the basket. A hawk circled high overhead, just a speck against the pale blue sky. "You're walking farther from the bank," Zahari said, stepping into the water beside her. His trousers were rolled to the knee, and he carried a bundle of split cane over one shoulder. "I know," she replied, not looking up. "But the chutes are better near the bend." He crouched and ran a hand along the water's surface. "The current's faster here. I won't drift." "I didn't say you would." She glanced at him, catching the hint of something quiet in his voice, something he hadn't put into words. "You've been uneasy since your aunt came." He stood again and adjusted the bundle on his shoulder. "She speaks of the past, of the blood debts. Of the paths I left behind. And do you regret leaving them?" "No." Sierra stepped toward the bank and emptied the basket onto a cloth spread over the grass. "She doesn't think I belong here." Zahari didn't answer right away. He pulled his knife from his belt and began trimming the cane into uniform strips. "She sees the world as it was, not as it is now." She asked if I would take Nahimi east, if I would leave you. He stilled. "And what did you say?" I told her I crossed a desert once and nearly died. The only thing that kept me alive was the thought of finding a place that wouldn't toss me aside when I no longer pleased it. Zahari met her eyes. "You found it?" "I found you." He set down the cane and stepped toward her, the water dark around his ankles. "Then there's nothing to fear." They walked back together, Zahari carrying the basket, Sierra brushing her fingertips along the tops of the grasses. His aunt stood near the tent, stirring a clay pot over the fire. Nahimi kicked her feet and let out a sharp, contented whine. "You'll need to speak to her," Sierra whispered as they approached. "I will." That night, Zahari sat across from his aunt, the firelight casting deep shadows on her lined face. Sierra remained inside the tent, rocking Nahimi, listening to the cadence of their voices. She couldn't make out the words, but she heard the tone shift from sharp to soft, from challenge to something closer to understanding. When Zahari came inside, he crouched beside her. "She will leave in 2 days," he said. "She accepts that this is your home now." Sierra's breath eased. And you? She asked what I had given up. I told her nothing was lost that I would not give again, not if it meant this. She leaned her head against his shoulder, the baby heavy and warm in her arms. She'll come back, she said she would. When the leaves fall. 2 days later, they saw Zahari's aunt off at the mouth of the canyon. She rode a sturdy mule and carried bundles of dried juniper and smoked meat. Before she left, she reached down and touched Nahimi's cheek. She has your eyes, she said to Zahari. But her spirit is her mother's. Sierra nodded once, and the old woman rode on. Fall came with brittle wind and a low sun. The cottonwoods turned gold, and the river thinned but never stopped. Zahari built a frame for drying squash and beans, and Sierra began stitching a quilt from scraps of fabric traded at the outpost 2 valleys over. They named the high ridge above their home Wahai, meaning to see far. From there, they could watch the changing lights sweep across the canyon floor, and on rare mornings when the mist hung low, it looked like the world had turned to cloud. One morning, while gathering dry twigs, Sierra paused and looked toward the path that led to the old well, the place where she'd first fallen to her knees, empty and near broken. She stood still for a long while, her hand resting on her hip, the wind tugging at her shawl. When she returned, Zahari was tending the fire. He looked up. You were gone longer. I was saying goodbye to the woman I used to be. He set down the pot and straightened. She brought you here. Yes, but I don't carry her anymore. He walked to her, set his hands on her waist. You carry us now, all 3. They stood there, the smoke curling between them, the baby's laughter drifting from the tent. That winter, they sealed the tent tighter and built a small lean-to for storing food. Nahimi took her first steps on the packed dirt beside the fire, her balance wobbly but determined. Zahari caught her before she tipped, and she squealed, pressing her face into his chest. Spring brought new shoots, and the first of the deer returned to the edge of the canyon. Sierra taught Nahimi to dip her fingers into the water and taste the snowmelt, and Zahari carved her a small flute from cedar. One evening, as the sun slipped behind the ridge, Zahari pulled a ring from the leather pouch he kept tied at his belt. It was simple braided silver, cool and bright. I made it from the trade metal we got in the last season, he said, holding it out. I want it on your hand. Sierra took it and slid it over her finger. I don't need it to know I'm yours. I know, but I wanted to mark it, not for you. For the world. She looked at the river, then the home they'd made, and finally at him. Then let the world see. Zahari kissed her then, slow and certain, his hand on her cheek, the ring cool between them. Years passed softly. Nahimi grew tall and sure-footed, her voice strong with both English and Zahari's tongue. She carried a basket on her hip by the time she was 5, and by 7 could track rabbit across the dry creek. They taught her the names of the stars, of plants, of the winds. Sierra's hair deepened with sun, her hands roughened with work, but her eyes never lost their steadiness. Zahari aged with grace, his strength quiet, his gaze always returning to the two of them like a compass. Their love did not burn wild or fast. It rooted, deep, true. The kind that holds firm through drought and storm, that grows even when no one is watching. And in the quiet hours when the fire had burned low and the wind moved gentle through the cottonwoods, Sierra would rest her head against Zahari's chest and listen not for danger, not for ghosts, but for the steady rhythm of a life built together, piece by piece, choice by choice. They had not started with ease, but they had ended with everything.